set the stage for this afternoon's conversation as well as introduce the panelists for us, please?
Craig, thank you very, very much. And really huge thank to Craig and to DLBA for setting this up during Bike Month, and in particular, Bike to Work and Bike to Shop week. Some of you may have heard the term the 15-minute city. You know, it's becoming in vogue to talk about that these days. And it's really talking about, you know, how do you create networks in cities where people can move around by any mode of transportation they want, whether they want a bike, whether they want a car, whether they want to take mass transit, whether they want to walk, whatever it is. And I'm so proud to be in Long Beach because I think we've really been on the forefront of this now for several years. And as Craig said, I mean, he and I met 12, 13 years ago as Long Beach was putting together a bike master plan. And I really give Craig and his staff, DLBA, just a huge credit for being at the forefront of putting in bike infrastructure, putting in places that people want to ride. And that's really what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about a little bit of where we've been, and in particular, we want to talk about kind of where we were in the last year and some of the things that we've learned from that. And then we want to talk about where we're going to go around the city. And we know we've got an incredibly diverse city. And not all parts of our city have been treated equally in the past. So we want to address that issue a little bit. So as Craig said, we've got a panel. I'm going to start in the upper left here with Ricardo. Ricardo Light is with the city. He's within the planning department, within transportation and mobility. He actually works with our transportation traffic engineer, our Carl Hickman. And so Ricardo is responsible for putting together a lot of the things that you see around the city in terms of bike infrastructure, working with our scooter program, working with our bike share program, working with community outreach. So we're going to hear from Ricardo about where we've been, but more importantly about where we're going to go. Right below Ricardo is Brenda, and Brenda is with the LA County Bike Coalition, and we're really fortunate to have Brenda with us today. She is from Southeast LA, born, so a native of LA and LA County, and brings a vast experience for us on biking and mobility throughout the county. Went to UCLA, got her degree from there, and now is responsible for community outreach with the LA County Bike Coalition. Next to Brenda is Charlie. Charlie's a Long Beach native, but he, see, what's the right word? Escaped, left, abandoned, I believe is the proper word, us in Long Beach to go to Seattle. And Charlie, just for your information, it is 80 degrees in Long Beach today with blue skies. So we pity your rainy Seattle today, but anyway, so Charlie started off kind of biking across the country, as thinking about advocacy, looked at what we could do, worked for DLBA for a while, went to high school here in Long Beach and college. So he's got a really firm grasp on what's happening in Long Beach. But the reason that he was invited on the panel is, one, his Long Beach background, but really importantly, his perspective from Seattle, which is one of the leading cities in doing mobility. And so he's working for the Seattle Transit up there and on the mobility side. Johnny is with Pedal Movement. He's CEO of Pedal Movement. And if you've ever done a bike valet in Long Beach, you've seen the Pedal Movement folks. They do bike valet. They service all of our bike share bikes, a variety of services. And they actually, their headquarters is in the bike station in downtown Long Beach on the Transit Mall. Again, Johnny from the LA, Southern California area. And finally, down here in the lower left is Chris Nolte. And Chris is our business owner. on the call. If you've been down Broadway between Pine and Pacific, you may have seen Chris's shop called Propel. Chris started his business in Brooklyn and saw the great opportunities in Long Beach. And so what, Chris, 3 years ago? Came to Long Beach. And so we're going to get his perspective. Chris sells e-bikes. And we know that the e-bike world is just exploding. And so we're going to get Chris's perspective from a business perspective, from a Long Beach perspective, from a Brooklyn perspective, but really from that e-bike perspective. So with that, I want to start the conversation. And please, if you have questions, put them in the chat box. Craig's going to be monitoring the chat box as we go along. So Johnny, you've had a chance in the last year to kind of see all parts of Long Beach and kind of what's happened during COVID from a mobility bike perspective. So what are your key takeaways?
Yeah, good question, Alan. Thanks everyone here who's joining the webinar, and thanks for having myself and Pedal Movement here. So let's think about it, right? 1 year ago, everyone, safer at home orders were in place. Everyone kind of immediately went into their house and, was trying to figure out the next steps for their life. So between the city, between, our local residents, and between our businesses, we had a very interesting opportunity, right? Because now we have to recreate, we have to, go to various businesses nearby. We have a certain radius that we had to stay within. So it gave everyone the opportunity to kind of try some new things, right? And do some problem solving. And so what we found with Pedal Movement is right soon, here comes May, bike month typically, and right out the gate, bike sales just went through the roof. Bike sales, bike services, and we were like, wow, what's happening? Like everyone's just going back to their bicycle, to the one mode of transportation that they actually know, that is sitting in their garage, that they haven't touched in, maybe a couple of years. Even all the way to, cities and DLBA saying, okay, well, we have our businesses who can't, operate inside. So what are we going to do? Well, we want to put them outside, but maybe the street, is a little bit too fast for these parklets. So what did DLBA do? They shut down some corridors. They opened up the streets. They allowed businesses to come in. And so for us, I think it was more trying to keep up with the demand as people are getting excited and they're trying to, imagine what a city could be like, essentially without cars. And I do know one of the things that we got a lot is we saw a lot more people using the current infrastructure all around Long Beach. And, I would ask why, like, why are you out now versus, a year ago? And, the biggest answer was like, well, we feel safer because there's less cars are going slower. So I think for us that it was the opportunity for people to kind of step outside their comfort zone and explore something within their limits.
Great, thanks, Shane. So we want to come back and talk about what makes that sustainable, but we'll move on for just a sec here. So Chris, from a business owner perspective and someone that's located in the heart of downtown, what's your key takeaways from this past year?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for everybody joining, and I'm really honored to be amongst everyone here. It's been interesting. I mean, I think the way I look at it is, as with many things, I've heard it described that we had to go from 2020 to 2030 in 1 year. And I think that's kind of what we've been experiencing. Like we got a little taste of the future, I guess you can say. Hopefully not in a negative way, but just in some of the positive takeaways, the silver lining of this experience, right? But ultimately, to piggyback on a lot of the things that Johnny shared, I see the same things. I see also, more people working from home. So the potential of living a more localized lifestyle becomes more possible. I don't think that people commute an hour each way to work by choice. You know, I don't think most people get up in the morning and get excited about, you know, driving an hour. You know, some people maybe do, but you know, as that possibility of working from home as businesses kind of got forced into that, I think, and as you know, some of the employees got to experience that, I see that shift, you know, kind of happening more and more. I see the possibility of like a one car household becoming more and more viable, and that sort of thing. And yeah,
So what's
you know,
happened with e-bike sales in the last year, Chris? I know you struggled a little bit with just
yeah,
availability.
yeah, e-bikes definitely become quite popular. I think that, yeah, it's I guess to some extent it's a accessibility thing. You know, some people think of e-bikes initially as just like a physical thing. Like if you have physical limitations, the e-bike is a good thing. But I think the thing that people often underestimate is the kind of mental limitations people have towards biking, like the, you know, intimidation of going out, of being able to, you know, ride for extended period, to keep up with their friends and that sort of stuff. So I think e-bikes become more approachable, and I think as they become more commonplace in society, it, you know, people get into them a bit more. So I think that that's part of why, you know, it's just, I mean, they were covered a lot in the media, this and that. More and more places are having electric bike share, which I hope that we see that in Long Beach soon, you know, with the help of pedal movement and in the city. But yeah, I think it's just they've been around for a while, but I think they're just kind of becoming, it's for people like just getting into biking. I think a lot of times people do end up opting for that. I mean, you know, but yeah, it all depends. But yeah, it's definitely growing quite a bit.
Just real quick, Chris. So you came from Brooklyn to Long Beach to open a business, right? Why? An e-bike business. What was it that attracted you here?
Most people would just say I'm crazy, but you know, so I started in New York. The laws in New York were not so favorable for electric bikes, but despite that, I believed in the vision that electric bikes like can change the way that cities are, people experience cities, the way that we move about in cities. We could become less dependent on cars and things like that. And from New York, we do a decent business online. And from New York, we had a pretty good size, or a pretty good part of our business was in Southern California. I had to pick a place in Southern California. I looked at most places in Southern California, and I chose Long Beach. And I chose it for a variety of reasons. Now, you know, it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of the start to a really thriving bike culture and bike infrastructure. And there's people like doing amazing things, like many of the people on this panel today. You know, but I see also like in New York that it's further along, or places like Seattle that's a bit further along as far as like those things being built up. And I figure it would be interesting to be a part of starting something like that. Not necessarily to say that like we have any sort of serious like stake in that. Plenty of people came before me and done amazing things, and I was inspired by that. I saw what's happening here. And beyond that, I also think that Long Beach, what I noticed is that the culture of the people in Long Beach seemed to be pretty like open-minded. And that was a big deal to me. And I think that if we're gonna accept some of these new ideas and stuff like that, that's what it requires. So I think that Long Beach, out of many places in Southern California, has one of the best opportunities to potentially really foster this like new mobility movement in a pretty significant way. And so that's really what moved me, I think, to want to be here specifically.
Thanks, Chris. So Brenda, you've got a perspective from around LA County and beyond. So what have you seen in the past year that really stands out for you and get you enthused about biking?
Yeah, like a lot of other people have already mentioned, right? There was this transition from being at home and working from home a lot. And maybe people weren't getting as much activity as they usually were, and taking for granted, right? Just like your commute makes you get up and out and about and out of the house. And so I feel like, I know for myself and probably a lot of other people, you maybe were going days without going outside and getting that sunlight, then just, feeling alive. And so I think cycling really provided that opportunity for people to get out there. The reduction in like regular day-to-day traffic also did that. And so what came with that was kind of an unprecedented opportunity for officials and people who are responsible for the design of our streets to kind of pivot quickly, transition quickly to quick build projects that would help people feel safe. And those are really great. And I think that there's more potential to see where stuff like that goes, while also keeping in mind that some of those quick build projects don't always take into account the needs and concerns of all communities. So, again, like whoever is maybe the most influential or has the most ability to influence the design of the street will still kind of get those benefits before other communities as well. So I think that that was something that was really inspiring to see, and something that we should continue to explore while keeping that kind of critical eye on it as well, to make sure that these amazing quick build design projects are equitably distributed to several communities who will need them and use them.
Great, Brenda. Thanks for the quick build really stand out for me as well. For people that aren't familiar with a quick build project, just 30 seconds. What do you mean by a quick build, Brenda?
So you see a lot of, I'm not sure what they're called. I'm going to call it a sandwich board, but it's those like plastic boards. It's like City of Los Angeles on it. And you just kind of, put those on a street. They would close the streets to any traffic that wasn't local traffic and designated only for local traffic, cycling and pedestrians. And that's something that usually would take a really long time and a really long process to achieve, which is supposed to take so long because you want all of that community input and you want to hear from all of the community. And so you have to find that balance between getting things done and not getting bogged down with too much red tape, while still making sure that you are listening to the needs of different community members.
Back when I worked for the city as a bike coordinator, I'd go in and I'd talk to our council members and I'd say, you've just been elected. If you want to get something in your district before you're termed out, start today. Because it took 5, 6, 7 years to really, from the time you wrote a grant till it was on the ground easily. And this quick build has just changed how we view what we can do from a time and from a cost perspective. So thanks, Brenda. Charlie, what's your perspective from Seattle these days?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I just want to say thanks for the chance to join here. In response to your comments about me escaping up to Seattle, Long Beach is my home, and I've always kind of seen it as this. I'm going out and training so I could bring some skills back to Long Beach, and it's fun to be able to chat with the group here today. I really connect with a lot of what Brenda spoke to. As with the entire world, there was a quick turnaround and a quick shift, but it felt like in Seattle, it kind of came on really quickly. We had some of the first COVID cases in the entire country, and we kind of started thinking about this and talking about this. And then it seemed like overnight, everybody was home, and, our worlds had been kind of completely upended. So, like Brenda said, I think there was this moment of kind of shaking things up, and that led to some behavior change of people. And I'm really happy to see how many people turned to bicycling. And it exploded in a big way here in Seattle. Seattle has some of the top commuting rates and is consistently, if not number one, in the top 3 of the league's most bike-friendly cities. But between August of 2019 and August of 2020, we saw over a 35% increase in people riding their bikes. And an exciting part of that is 20% of the people who said that they increased their riding were starting from basically zero. So we're getting on the bike for the first time. And that data is backed up by bicycle counters throughout the city of Seattle. And then just anecdotally trying to buy anything for my bicycle, every shop was saying, we can't touch your bike for another 2 months, and we don't have anything to sell you. And And I think some of the things that supported that is, again, like Brenda said, people being home and looking for kind of an escape from the four walls of where they live and getting out and connecting with their communities. I think the city of Seattle really supported a lot of that desire to shift and give people space to move around. We have over 35 miles of what we call stay healthy streets up here in Seattle, which is restricted to basically all automobiles except for local access, but is dedicated for people walking and biking. And I live a block away from one, and just anecdotally seeing how many families are out there and different groups of people who you wouldn't normally see out charging on the Seattle streets. I think we also saw, bicycling as a really important way to keep a sense of community and a sense of connection. An exciting thing that I would love to point to is the Seattle Pedaling Relief Project, which was born out of the pandemic, which has now grown to over 500 volunteers weekly who work with local food banks to deliver food from the banks to individual households. So just seeing that, identifying the needs for communities to support itself, and I think bicycling really stood up as a way for people to safely connect with their communities. I also think this got people thinking on a much more hyper local scale, which, as we're told to basically stay home, I think a lot of people were thinking about limiting their radius of travel, and bicycling was a great way to kind of bridge the gap between the area you could walk to and the areas that you didn't want to drive to and kind of leave your community. So again, a great tool there. And then finally, about these rapid builds, I think it's an exciting moment to see the city of Seattle and cities across the United States make rapid, people-centric, and on the ground level, the individual level changes to support the lifestyle of the people in the city, and really with a focus on livability and helping people connect with their communities. So some great trends that I think came out of the pandemic, and I hope we can find some ways to sustain that growth.
Great, thanks, Charlie. And on this topic, Ricardo, I want to wrap up with you here. In the city, you guys have been working from home for the last year. How has it impacted you as an employee and thinking about mobility, things like that? What are your key takeaways?
How has the last year and working from home impacted me?
Yeah, kind of thinking about mobility and what you take back to the job from that.
Sure. Well, even before the pandemic, I mean, biking was really my main mode of transportation. I am fortunate to live and work in the same city, so my commute is fairly easy. I do most of my commuting for errands and work by bicycle. I would say working from home, I think the biggest impact to me really is just not being out in the field as often as I would like to be. Even though it's short, the commute to work still allows me it's an opportunity to be out as a transportation planner, to experience the streets and see the streets and kind of see how traffic is flowing, and really, being in the field is very valuable, I think, for transportation planner, any planner, but transportation specifically, to really just kind of live what is actually happening out there. So working from home has kind of limited my ability to be out there as often as I was before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to kind of wrap this side up, Charlie used the term behavior changes that we've seen. We talked about quick build. We talked about not necessarily equitable across all sectors of our society and our communities. We talked about the advent of slow streets. 35% increase in cycle. A lot of them from new people. We talked about people not even being able to get bikes. So my question for you, and I'm just going to open it up for the kind of conversation here, is it sustainable going forward? And what are the things that we should be doing in Long Beach to make it sustainable? Go ahead, just grab anyone who wants to grab it, go ahead. Chris, you look like you're contemplating.
Yeah, I could jump in here, as this is something I've been thinking about a lot. And, for those that are not familiar, there was another bike boom I think it was somewhere around the 70s, and partly related to, kind of the gas crisis and that sort of thing. And it didn't really stick. And one of the main reasons it didn't stick is because we didn't really invest in infrastructure. In some places they did invest in infrastructure, and it kind of stuck. And, perhaps, some of these cities like Seattle, New York, like those are some of those things that kind of helped bring that together. But the reality is, like, if people don't feel safe, they don't ride, so it's one thing to ride for recreation and that sort of thing, and you can pick maybe where you're going to ride, and you can go out of your way to feel safe and know that you're going to have a safe place to ride. But if you want to ride for transportation and to actually see the viability of that going forward, I think that we need infrastructure and people need to support it. And I think that people got a bit of a taste of that, what some of the slow streets can be, and some of the parklets and some of these other sort of things. But I think that ultimately we need to have community support around these things to keep it that way. The funny thing is, a lot of times people visit Europe and they come back and they're like, oh, it's so amazing, nice to walk around and this and that, and they have all these areas where there's no cars and it's such a beautiful thing. And they come back to their community and are like, we want more parking and like this and that. And they're fighting for this and saying, like, and not realizing how those ideas are at odds with each other. And so for me, I think that's one of the bigger details to consider and to look at, in our own lifestyle habits, and actually what these are, and to understand, that maybe giving up some of these creature comforts could bring a better life to many more people, and a safer life to many people as well.
Great, thanks, Chris. So Brenda, what do you see as far as sustainability of what we've talked about?
Yeah, to build on what Chris was saying, to ensure that there's not only infrastructure, but that infrastructure is a comprehensive connected network, that I think Long Beach does a pretty good job of doing that. And in addition to that, really funding bike programs as well. So LACBC, for example, has a middle school bike club going, and like we're trying to engage people in order to kind of not perpetuate this idea that growing up and getting a driver's license and getting your car is the default for getting around, and like that's what you need to do as you come of age, right? So I think, like, for me and maybe other people like me who didn't choose to get a car right away, like you're kind of seen as a bit of a social pariah. And so really kind of changing that culture and like making it a little bit more commonplace, empowering the youth with this idea and this information about how to ride and where to ride, and building this culture in the schools, I think is really important. In addition, there's other stuff like a bicycle delivery network. So again, like we're all kind of shopping online a lot for this past like year and change. And so how can we change our new ways of shopping to get all of our deliveries through bicycles or e-bikes, and create this more kind of a network that's focused on that, instead of still relying on big clunky vehicles to get the stuff that we need. And in addition, creating programs like bike match or bike libraries to ensure that people who might not have the money to get a new bike or even a used bike, who don't have access to a bike, maybe they don't have a place to store a bike. I know my apartment's really small. People assume I have more than one bike because I've been biking for 10 years, but I just have one because I have a tiny apartment. So a lot of people might not even have room to store their bike safely where they live. And so having spaces, not just bike share, but like free bikes for people who need them, I think is also really important.
Well, that's great, Brenda. That leads me takes me back to Johnny, Johnny and Ricardo as well. I mean, you guys are really actively involved in our bike share program. Johnny, I know you guys have been putting kiosks and things around the city. Can you build on what Brenda was talking about from a bike share, bike library, use of our bike share system?
Sure. I think the big point here that coincides with me, what Chris mentioned, Brenda mentioned, is, why didn't the bike boom last in the 70s? Sure, infrastructure is one, right? That safety is a big one. but why was there no infrastructure? Why isn't there as much infrastructure in some of these other cities like Long Beach may have? And I think the big point here is the culture, right? If we don't have elected officials or, city staff who are going to bat, which, luckily Long Beach and staff, I would say they do a pretty good job, but of course there are a lot of room for improvements, especially with this new age that we're in. It's like now we have this opportunity to continue some of these programs, kind of like, let's put our money where our mouth is and, show that these programs can continue to live on and that they are an important part of infrastructure. And one example of, a city government doing that is having a public, ride share program where, all communities can ride. When Pedal Movement took over the bike share system in 2017, we operated about 300 bikes, like 350 maybe, somewhere in there, and it was mostly concentrated, on the beachfront, downtown, one as far as maybe PCH at the time. And one of our main goals, coming into the program as an operator was we need to get bike share across this whole city. Specifically, we want to expand to North Long Beach. And so as soon as we came in, our main goal is to figure out what we need to do to help facilitate this movement with the city of Long Beach to make cycling more accessible into these communities that actually matter. And so, both parties definitely had to get creative to procure equipment that was no longer available. And, we did. We as in the city purchased an old bike share system from West Hollywood. We brought it in, we used resources to, powder coat these bikes to then expand the system to North Long Beach and begin some of this programming and some of this more love that is needed in Northside Long Beach. And so I think the conversation here is like, what resources can the city continue to put forward? But not only that, it's not just the city who, it needs to be doing this. It's also the community. It's also these residents. It's also businesses. From me being a bike advocate, I've been riding a bike in North Long Beach where I grew up since I was like, 5 or 7. And there was definitely no bike infrastructure there. Riding down to Hughes Middle School, I was taught to go down Atlantic because that's all that we knew on this busy street, and instead of having that education then to be like, if you just go one street over, it's much safer, it's much safer. So programming like that. And so that's one of the things that growing up that this city has definitely become more and more and more bike friendlier. And one of the things that we're most excited about is in this past year, there has been, a bit of a culture change, of course, across the nation, specifically Long Beach. And now for the first time ever, in my opinion, I think we have a city staff who are very motivated, very excited. We have a new mobility director who's coming in and understands the barriers to cycling. And if you don't understand the barriers of cycling, then what progress can we make, right? And so, I think to call it out for what it is, some of the barriers to cycling for some of these underserved communities, one is bike safety. We've talked about this entirely, and I think we all understand that, we can improve bike safety with programming. But the second biggest one is, underserved communities and specifically people of color, being harassed or victimized by current policy that may be in place. And, for me, it varies, across the board. I've had good experiences with PD. I've had some bad experiences with PD, but I don't think that's supposed to be a reflection across the board. I think it's more important to recognize that where we're at in this time is going to be whether this bike boom stays or not, right? And so for us, I think it's keeping this momentum, educating people, expanding resources, and figuring out how to rally up the folks and get involved. So we're, as a company and organization, we're very, very excited and pumped to, expand the footprint of our advocacy, making cycling more accessible and providing programming to communities who, actually need it the most.
That's great. So Terrific, Jen. So a week ago, I had a chance to interact with some LACBC folks and Metro and their bike share program. And so one of the things that Metro was doing was you could get a monthly bike pass for $1. Yeah, and what they did was they combined an online education program, 1 hour with a discussion of the bike share program and what people could do to get that and kind of how they fit together. That was really powerful, totally online. We probably had 20 people attend it, and I don't know what kind of response they got to the $1 offer, but what a great way to get people enthused. And just as Brenda's saying, I mean, a lot of people just don't have access to bikes. So Johnny, we now have bikes spread throughout the city from south to north, east. How about west?
Yep. It's pretty much the system size is the whole city.
Oh, that's great.
So you can ride wherever you want in Long Beach. Not to mention we're working with city staff to create a low-income program. I think that's a big necessary thing that we're hopefully pretty close to rolling out. But it's also small things like some communities don't have access to credit cards, and you need to have a credit card or a debit card to enroll in some of these programs, whether if it's using Uber or whatever. And so we're also brainstorming with the city on how we can create cash payment stations at various areas to where we can be like, hey, you don't have a credit card, you want to ride? Cool. Well, here are the resources.
Right. Yeah, no, that's such an important one. I mean, we think about infrastructure being a barrier, but financial, having access to a bike, all of those things, just bike education. I mean, all of the things that we really need to pursue. Charlie, what's going on in Seattle to make this sustainable?
Yeah, I respectfully, I appreciate the question and I understand where it's coming from, but I kind of take issue with that. It's not, is this going to be sustainable? I think there's trends that are coming down the pipeline that we need to be able to deal with. And, populations are growing in the city. We don't have more space. The climate's changing. We need a healthier population. We need better sustainability. So there's all these things we do need to facilitate more bicycling. I think when, there's what's the movie, Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. And I think we've seen that already in speaking of Long Beach, in the east to west from downtown to Belmont Shore, no shortage of bike facilities. And when you look at where people are riding, that's the majority of it. I think to continue the trend and to really broaden the scope of this is we need to think about services, whether it's from the city, how we're supporting communities, of thinking what communities need this the most and would benefit the most. I think, again, you look at a map of infrastructure throughout the city of Long Beach and you overlay that with a map of demographics, income as a key indicator there of where the services are being placed. And, it's a long process. And I know the city of Long Beach is working through the master plan. And like you said, Alan, if you want to get something done in your term, you need to have started it yesterday because things take a long time. But I think, the way that we keep this sustainable is, we need to bring more people into the fold of bicycling. We need to, put more infrastructure. We need more bike share. And then really connected to how Brenda was talking about is going in and supporting the community that's already there. Thinking upstream from the bicycle lane and thinking, how do we provide these folks with education? How do we, normalize the culture of bicycling where it's not seen as something you're either can't afford a car or it's a self-righteous lifestyle choice that you make. So I think we need to think holistically, and again, thinking of who has the greatest need and serves to benefit the most by increased services from the city and from a community-wide perspective.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Hey, don't forget if you have questions for anybody on the panel or whatever, type them in. We're anxious to, and we can maybe pick up some of those questions as we go along. Yeah, I see the comment here. Metro's in the process of revamping their entire bike share program, including pricing. I think that's just so important. Metro's done a really nice job of the bike share tied into your tap card. Because it really becomes just part of your transportation system. So lots of opportunities there. Ricardo, so the city's got a big on their backs as far as moving forward with the bike master plan and infrastructure and education. So from your perspective, where do you see us headed in the not too distant future from an infrastructure perspective and education, things like that?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll use this as an opportunity to answer Michael's question. He's asking, what is the city doing to slow streets and building connections across the city? I will say so in terms of the bike master plan, we've kind of reached a point where we have implemented all the low hanging fruit. We've kind of picked all the easy projects, easy bike facilities, the non-controversial projects. We've kind of reached the end of that. So really now we're kind of moving in to the more significant changes, which unfortunately can be more controversial. I know someone mentioned the Broadway bike lanes, and those were probably the most controversial bike project we've done to date. It's also been very impactful. Speeds have reduced a lot on Broadway. Bike ridership has gone up significantly on Broadway, and scooters as well, not just bikes, but other modes of transportation. But in terms of Bike Master Plan, we have added some connections on, like, Obispo recently got some bike lanes. The Daisy Bike Boulevard. We're adding a bike boulevard on Pine Avenue, North Pine up to Willow. We recently got grant funding for the city's first concrete curb protected bike lane on Pacific Avenue from Ocean to PCH. So things are in the pipeline. We're following the Bike Master Plan, which was voted on by City Council and completed through a long engagement process with the community. So city staff, we're working as best as we can within the means that we have. But it really makes our job a lot easier, in all honesty, to have support from the community. And that's where we need, like, advocates and community champions to really kind of organize an effort from the community to let their elected officials know that they want bike infrastructure and this is important to them. There's only so much city staff can do, right? I mean, we're guided by these documents that are voted on by the electeds and whatnot. But really, our work is guided by what the people want.
So, Ricardo, what's the best way for people to reach out to their council members or to you guys? What would you recommend?
Sure. Well, every council office has contact information. You can go to the government website, longbeach.gov. And the city website will have contact information for everyone's respective council member. That's probably the easiest way to reach out to their offices. Public Works also has contact information on there as well. Go Active Long Beach is the site specifically for our bureau, Transportation Mobility, and kind of all things related to biking and walking and scootering and all these other modes of transportation. That's Go Active Long Beach. We're also on social media. You can find our link through the city website as well. So all these are really channels of communication for people to reach out. And then,
so if they want to talk to somebody in the mobility group, can they call you?
Sure. Yeah, I can share my email address in the chat. I'm happy to do that.
I know Tony Cruz is out in the community a lot. Tony's come our community ambassador. So you, Tony,
as a public servant, that's why I'm here. I'm here to field calls and listen to what the community has to say, and I want to make sure that I'm doing right by everyone. But as an advocate yourself, it'd also be nice for folks to have information on how they can contact advocacy groups and maybe organize themselves as a community as well. That's like
Yeah.
movement more effective as a collective, right? As an organized group rather than individuals acting independently. And so I really think that that sort of organization is important for things to get done as well, you know.
Yeah, I agree with Ricardo entirely. I think, you know, what I mentioned in my experience, you know, growing up in Long Beach and getting involved and, you know, essentially co-founding a company that supports the bicycle worker and supports the community. You know, one thing that I do want to say is like the city can only do so much, and they're already doing an amazing job. But if they had more support from various community groups, not individually, but collectively, I think that's a big plus. And so, you know, I mean, and there's tons of programs that, you know, I'm sure a lot of us, even in this room, don't even know about. The Department of Health and Human Services just released RFP to do some programming in, you know, various underserved communities throughout Long Beach, where we can potentially get in front of a bunch of 4th and 5th graders and teach, you know, bike safety. So I think, you know, for the folks watching this webinar, you know, I would want to encourage you to get involved. You know, contact your local council person, or, you know, contact the mobility team. There's amazing people, city staff, Tony Cruz, Rachel Junkin, Ricardo here, Fern. They all care, and I think that is what makes Long Beach different than a lot of other cities that I have seen. Is that we have this culture that is a little bit punk rock, in my opinion, and that's why we're able to do some of these cool things. But I think it's important to keep, you know, pushing things forward.
Yeah, my experience in getting all the council members has been really, really positive. And one of the things a lot of people I don't know is council members have a full-time chief of staff. The council members aren't full-time. Most of them have a full-time job as well as their council responsibility. So their chief of staff is critical to getting things done and listening to the community. And so usually if you call the council office, and they usually have an office downtown, but they also have an office out in the district. The chief, so that's what they're there for. And most of them are in those jobs because they like to interact with the community. And so I really encourage people to reach out to those council members. And as Ricardo was saying, yeah, www.longbeach.gov. If you don't know what council district you're in, which a lot of us don't, right? Just go on there, it shows a map, you can figure out where you are, and you can figure out who your council member is. Go forward with that. Really, really powerful. Wow.
I also wanted to add, you know, we recently passed a Vision Zero document, Safe Streets Long Beach. So that's guiding a lot of our work as well. Our Department of Health and Human Services also is working with the Office of Traffic Safety on like kind of safety campaigns and education. And they have something called Walk and Roll Long Beach, which is a program kind of aimed at educating folks on traffic safety as well. And we're going to start rolling out some traffic safety campaigns as well, you know, starting this summer. So
what kind of things, Ricardo? What kind of things will be involved in that?
Yeah, for the education campaign, we're looking at things like print materials, so postcards. I mean, those are kind of easy pickings. We want to look at doing bus advertisements, things like yard signs. We actually just launched a yard sign program, Slower is Safer. You can find it on the Go Active website. You can request to either pick up a yard sign at your local library, or you can have it dropped off contact free. Again, more information at Go Active. So we'll be doing more types of yard signs. We're looking at doing cabinet wraps, those traffic signal cabinets that you probably haven't noticed unless you've noticed them, but there's one at every intersection. Some of them have artwork on them, but we're looking at doing kind of traffic safety messaging on some of these. So that's kind of just free real estate for messaging. Most of these kind of just link. So
go ahead. I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, that's
so one of the big issues that we constantly hear about in Long Beach is, great, I had a bike and it is no longer in my possession. Somebody ripped it off. What are we doing about it? Chris, looks like you got a comment.
Yeah, well, actually, I wanted to just because Brenda mentioned that before. She's like, well, some people might expect to have multiple bikes, but I just have one, and I don't have a place to keep it. And I think that bike parking is a really big deal. Some of these more mature bike communities, I guess you could say, they have a lot of bike parking. That's a big deal, and that's actually something that's going on in LA right now. That there's these like hubs that have rolled out that have secure bike parking that you can lock up your bikes, and that's kind of just the start, but to my understanding there's a lot more of them to come. uh, Pedal Movement and the bike station downtown is currently a secure parking facility, but from my perspective we need a lot more of them. And it really makes owning your own bike a lot more. Not everybody necessarily has the room in their home, or you could potentially live in a walk up or something like that. It's not so easy to store the bike, and they might not necessarily feel so secure to store it on the ground. And I think having a good network of secure bike parking facilities is a really big deal, and it just kind of feeds on that infrastructure. So the bottom line is, thinking about all this stuff, it needs to be comprehensive and it needs to be complete. And I think there's a lot of efforts that are moving forward, and you can't really fully realize the benefits until they're actually complete. So I think we have experienced and seen a lot of people that are essentially early adopters. Like, we haven't actually got the mainstream into this thing yet, and we won't until it becomes like comfortable for everybody to do and accessible for everybody. And that means that we need all of those things. And I'm not in any way suggesting that it's an easy undertaking, but I am suggesting that it's you don't get to eat the cake by putting in 6 out of 10 ingredients. It's just basically you need all of them, and
I like that.
that's the reality. And I'm really grateful for Johnny mentioned Long Beach is a little punk rock, and I think that's true, and I think that's part of the reason why people are kind of able to get out like ahead of the curve a little bit. But the reality is, like, the bike master plan, it talks about 8 to 80, and really the bike infrastructure is not complete. It's not safe until an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old can feel safe and comfortable on that.
Yeah.
And we got a ways to go to get there. And so a lot of times people complain, just as Charlie was mentioning, like, the Field of Dreams thing, like, if you build it, it will come, which actually came way before that time in the Bible, but it's a whole nother thing. But basically, a lot of times people will say, oh, we put the bike lanes in and people don't use them, or no, there's nobody biking here. Why are we going to put bike lanes in? And the reality is, I think that we've experienced this in the pandemic. What we've seen in this really a taste of what it could be, and it's not even near the full potential. This is like people like, oh yeah, like I'll dip my toe in there, but actually you make it safe and comfortable for all and accessible to all, it changes everything.
So Craig, have you got a perspective on this whole thing from the DLBA? A couple questions for us?
Well, actually, you guys mentioned Tony Cruz, the city's ambassador for bicycling. He's got a question. He wanted to know, what about the programs for youth, bicycle rodeos, bicycle donations, and helmet giveaways, training rides and camps, bicycle recycling, etc., through non-city programs? So maybe Charlie, great. That's great. The question really is, what are some ideas or programs in fostering the current momentum for kids and their families to bike? And I think that leads into, and it's a perfect segue, what Chris just talked about, 8 to 80. Charlie, you want to hit that?
Sure. If I can bring a little perspective up from Seattle up here, I think it's very important to think about reaching people at a young age and encourage. I think when people normalize bicycling when they're young, I think that has proven effects of their propensity to keep riding throughout their lives. And I think removing it kind of from the the onus on the city as the kind of top-down approach to bicycle education, I think, is an important tactic. And I'll point to Cascade Bicycle Club up here in Seattle, the largest statewide bicycling nonprofit in the U.S. in terms of membership. Cascade operates a youth education program in partnership with 5 different school districts around Seattle, serving over 100,000 students right now. For about a decade, it was only in elementary schools, and then they recently expanded to middle schools. And that's a great kind of model of Cascade puts on community events, which fund, big giant bicycle rides with thousands of people, which basically all of that money funds the education programs where they work with public school districts to provide the bicycles, the logistics, the curriculum, and the training to their PE teachers to have a bicycling unit for all students. So it's a pretty exciting thing that basically any student who attends public school in the Seattle area, by the time they enter high school, have gone through at least a year of or a section of bicycle education through their school district. And then I also think, again, coming back to the community level is, behavior change comes more likely when people hear new information from voices that they trust. And I think somebody popping in from the city saying, hey, we're here to hand out some helmets and do some outreach, I think is not a bad thing and is helpful. But the more you can find those community advocates or the kind of connectors within the community and empower them with resources, with training, with curriculum to be able to do that education in a more horizontal fashion than top down.
So, Brenda, LACBC has got a pretty active education program, coupled with Metro funding some things on education. Can you talk a little bit about the LACBC perspective on that?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned our Metro partnership, and those are classes that are geared more towards adults, or people who are 16 and older as well are also welcome. And those are free classes. People usually get, either a helmet and bike lights or a tap card. Right now that everything's been online, people get something for free. And when these classes were in person, they were great because you really got to do a lot of the techniques that you need to feel confident when riding in a recreational or non-recreational setting, right? Keeping your balance, signaling, being comfortable, taking your hands off the handlebar, looking behind you and scanning, like all of those things. And so we really got to work with people hands-on. We bring bikes for people who don't have them that Metro provides. And so it's a great program. And you really get to see how many people don't know how to ride or just aren't very good at riding as an adult. And I know when I first started riding as an adult, I, crashed a lot. I had a lot of incidents because I just hadn't ridden for many years. And even as a kid, I didn't ride a lot. And so I think that you also have a lot of youth and young people who might be embarrassed to be able to say, like, I actually don't know how to ride, so I'm never going to ride. I'm never going to try it. And you probably have a lot of adults who are in that camp as well. And so really normalizing that and letting people know that it's okay to, fall a little bit. Our middle school bike club logo is, if you fall, get back up. And they came up with that and they voted for that. And so we currently do have that middle school bike club. It's after school and it's in a partnership with a different program that's meant to empower PE teachers with bicycle skills and knowledge to incorporate that into their PE unit as well. And that is a partnership with LAUSD. It would be really hard to kind of do that without LAUSD as a really supportive and awesome partner. And so sometimes you really need those cycling champions within these other big behemoth bureaucratic organizations to kind of be like, yeah, let's do this, let's figure it out. And it's funded by Caltrans. And so you need to have these types of transportation agencies see the value in not just funding highway expansion, which we've seen doesn't actually really reduce traffic, and really funding these alternative modes of transportation, active transportation, and things like that. And we also have a really great partner that we work with sometimes called Walk and Rollers, and they focus a lot on those bicycle rodeos on a case by case basis. They come to your school, set everything up, have your students go through this course, and that can also be really, really fun.
Yeah, well, one of the things we probably haven't done enough of in Long Beach, well, I'm sure we haven't, is reaching out to work more closely with Long Beach Unified. One of the things that I'm really proud of, and one of the clubs that I belong to, is fellow Allegro. And every year we do a Bikes for Kids program. and it's a group of third graders. We take one third grade class. So typically 130 to 150 kids. And it's so cool. You have the kids write an essay. What would what would a bike do for me in my community? And you tell them that every class, there's going to be one kid from the class that's going to, with the best essay, is going to get a bike. And so you have the big assembly, and the kids come in, and the teachers read this assembly, read the essays, and then one of the fellow Lego people go, well, principal, we've got one more bike. Have you got just one more essay? And it goes on and builds, and it's kind of like, well, maybe we've got a couple. And then at the end, you open up the curtains, and there's 150 bikes for 150 kids. And most of these kids have never gotten anything new of that, import to them, and the smiles on these kids. And the parents come in and go, my kid just came home and said that she got a free bike. Is that right? And the answer is yes. And what struck me is it doesn't cost a lot of money to do this. 150 bikes for $10,000. It's about $60, $70. Bike, lock, and helmet. And so Velo Allegro, with about 100 members, we come in on a Friday evening and do a bike build. And then the assembly is early that next week. And it's one of those things for just reaching out to the community. And the YMCA in Long Beach is a huge partner. Alfredo Velasquez, who headed that. And he was actually the one that brought the idea from San Diego to us. So that's another outreach method for the community. And I think we probably have Cleve Law on the call here, and Cleve's with Lightning Velo. And one of the things that Lightning did, and again, I know Tony's on the call as well. Tony does his tour of Long Beach, right? And so people say, wow, I'm going to go out and do 30 miles, or you do Tony's Gran Fondo, which is an unthinkable 100 miles, right? And the Lightning Velo people actually had training sessions for people. So again, it's how comfortable you are on the bike. And then again, through Metro and through LACBC, we've offered classes through the Parks Department for seniors, things like that. So really, really powerful ways to reach out in the community. And really, you guys are hitting the nail on the head here, is that we need to take it beyond just the city. We need to take it into the community. And I know Johnny with Pedal Movement, they're a private corporation. Charlie actually works with the transit. Who do you report through, Charlie, in Seattle?
So I am a community engagement specialist for Sound Transit. We operate light rail, commuter rail, and long range buses in Seattle. Basically, LA Metro's equivalent in the Seattle region. Yeah. So very much transportation, and bicycling is an aspect of that. But focusing on
so it's interesting. So in LA, we've got Metro, and then with Long Beach, we've got the bus transit. And we've talked a little bit with the transit folks about doing more cooperative and cooperation on that side of things. But we could, again, probably reach out to more. We have more questions here, Craig, that you've seen?
Yeah, Tony's got another one. And maybe, Ricardo, if you could hop on this. When is the pump track at Willow Springs scheduled to open? I don't know if that's...
I can take that one. So Pedal
What's a pump track?
So Pump Track is a BMX course that has various rollers, and it's designed not to essentially pedal, but to use momentum to kind of gain some speed and gain some skills on a bicycle. So we, as in Pedal Movement and Parks and Rec Department, we've come together to open up the first Long Beach Pump Track. And this is going to be the first one that's going to be free to the public. The nearest free pump track is all the way down in San Diego or Temecula. So I know there's a lot of excitement happening around this. And so we have a few more things to kind of figure out before we finally open, but we're, hoping anywhere from a month or now, definitely before summer gets rolling. But yeah, we're building the pump track, and the community is pretty freaking excited. So it's
so Johnny, that's at the corner of Spring and
California. So right on the, if anyone here has seen the bike master plan, that is essentially going to be the bicycle network that takes, people all the way from North Long Beach all the way down to south, down to the waterfront right there in Orange and Spring. So we're not far off from the main, intersection from east to west and north to south. So I think that will be a pretty cool facility, and some more programming to come.
That's great. Cool. Other questions out there, Craig? So we just opened up Pier J. Craig was forwarding the press announcement from that. And of course, Pier J takes us right down into the heart of the port of Long Beach. So it's pretty cool, these connections. So yeah, a lot of people would go out and they would fish out there, but they had to take their car. And it's interesting, again, kind of thinking about getting businesses and other entities enthused about bike infrastructure and culture change. The port stepped up 10 years ago now and said, hey, we want to be a community service organization. And so it took 10 years to do it, but they just put in that. And I encourage people about it. It's really cool. You start anywhere in Long Beach, of course, but start at the aquarium. And you go out over the Queensway Bridge, go right down by the Queen Mary, which is hopefully still floating, and then go around by the cruise terminal and all the way out to the end of to Pier J. So if you're a big fisherman, they put in fishing piers out there. There are bathroom facilities. So our head of our port and stuff was Mario Cordero was out there. Our council members and what's echoing what you guys are saying. We've got such strong support at the level. Eric Lopez is head of Public Works, and so Ricardo ultimately reports up through Eric. They're so supportive of what we're trying to do. But again, it's so useful to hear, for them to hear from the people. We often talk about the vocal minority, right? And it's kind of like, Broadway is a good example. There were a few people that really did not want that. They thought it was the worst thing in the world. And yet you see how many people use it now, people who live in the neighborhood, and it's been incredibly well accepted. The people that accept it tend to be pretty quiet, in contrast to the people that are opposed to it. So yeah, I really encourage you, we were talking about advocacy, things like that, to reach out. But one of the other things I'm really excited about, and a good friend of Craig's and mine, Mark Bixby. Mark was the ultimate advocate. Unfortunately, 10 years ago, he was in a plane crash and passed away. But he's a really good example of what a person can do. If you were down at the old City Hall, there was a big penny farthing bike up on the wall, and it said Long Beach, America's most bike-friendly city. And Mark goes, and Mark was responsible for getting it there. He had a friend of his designed it and built it for free, and Mark got it put up. And Mark would come into our that at the time city manager Pat West. And Mark goes, Pat, go big or go home, get it done. And so he did. And we're bike friendly city. We've got this thing on the wall, and Mark one day picks up the newspaper, and it says, we're going to build a new bridge to replace the Gerald Hesman Bridge. And Mark goes, gee, I wonder if there's a bike facility on that. And he went, no, there's not. And Mark goes, well, and literally, this is Mark doing this. Mark's going, how can we be a bike friendly city if we don't have a bike facility there? Went to the port. What did the port say? Port said, that's a bridge to nowhere. Why the hell do you want to do that? Pat West, who's a big bike supporter, said, oh man, this is millions of dollars in jobs at Long Beach. The city can't champion this one. So Mark and I accompanied Mark, went up to a coastal commission meeting, and we said, hey, you guys are authorizing this bridge and there's no bike facility on it. And the head of the coastal commission at the time, Peter Douglas, said, gee, we're wondering when someone would come ask that question. And he basically said, we won't sign the permit unless they include a bike facility. And that was the result of one person. So we've talked earlier about the importance of advocacy, and it's easy to say, well, it's the city's responsibility. But we really want to engage the community and empower the community to say, hey, this is what we want. This is what makes our community livable. And as everyone here has said, Long Beach, we're so far along, and we're the only other, I think, city in Southern California that comes in LA area, comes close is Santa Monica. But we're ahead of most communities. But that doesn't mean we're anywhere close to being done. We still have a tremendous amount that we can do. And I think, again, we yesterday spent some time talking about equity, and we've talked a little bit about it today. We've got a lot of facilities near the coastal area. I mean, I live in Belmont Heights, and I've got a bike boulevard out in front of my house. That's not true throughout the community. So what, Brenda, you've been a real advocate for communities that have been underserved historically. What should we be doing? We've talked a little bit about it already, but maybe you could reiterate some of that.
I mean, sure. I think there's a lot of layers and levels to how we can, keep equity in mind in the things that we do. Like, one of the first most basic things I think that we can do is acknowledge the way that our streets are designed, the way that our society has come into play, built upon the legacy of segregation and genocide and institutional racism, right? So even though we may not be face to face with all of this racial violence and racial discrimination necessarily on a day-to-day basis, like, the communities that we live in and the way that we conduct ourselves as a society are kind of inherited from this legacy for centuries, right? And so I think that's one of the first things that we can do is start to kind of, take some time to look at the places in which we live and see the contributions that a lot of people have put into our society that maybe don't necessarily fit the mainstream. Another thing that we can do is also to look at laws a little bit more critically. So, right now there's a lot of conversation around the, Idaho stop law to treat a stop sign as a yield sign, and, whether that's good or bad and what that means for everyone. And really it's comes down to a conversation around how can we reduce the excuses that law enforcement maybe can have in order to harass and potentially kill or maim people of color. And so those are some of the things I think that we can start to think about. In addition to all the other stuff we've talked about, which is, facilitating access to people, to connect them with bicycles, connect them with infrastructure and all that stuff. So I think a lot of it is really starting to kind of think critically about the way that we have been accustomed to do things and what the legacy is from all of that.
Craig, what have you got to add into the conversation here? You've done so much in the downtown area. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think it's part of our future. I mean, it's obviously been, a long road over the last 10, 12 years. But I think this is really a movement towards building and developing stronger community. And it's making connections between our number of different communities that we have throughout the city. And I think that's important. And it starts with infrastructure. It starts with education. It starts with a level of equity and understanding that underserved neighborhoods probably don't have the amenities and conveniences that we have in certain parts of our city. And I want to be able to certainly continue to advocate for that. It's really, really important for us. I know my life, on a personal note, my life changed when Mark introduced me to bicycling, and just the idea of utilizing that convenience and having it part of your life. And I didn't realize it until after he passed. And More so when Charlie and Noah rode from New York City back to Long Beach, and that was,
Right.
was 2015. And then Charlie came to work with us a little bit, and I got to know a little bit more about, the intricacies of bicycling and really what infrastructure really meant. And obviously, we were pushing for stronger infrastructure in our downtown and trying to engage the business community to better understand really what that meant for them. Although it's a cultural change, it means something very different to certain sectors of our community. But we were at the forefront of trying to educate the business community, as well as continue to advocate on behalf of the district with the city to continue pushing for different infrastructure. And then in 2016, I bought a bicycle that now I'm able to commute 7.5 miles one way to work, and I could do that any day of the week. I don't own a car. I do have a valid driver's license, for those of you that are wondering. But at the same time, it's like, that has changed my life. And that is something that I've embraced, I've welcomed, and it's something that I doubt very much if it will ever change. And I'm sure there's many more out there that have similar stories, but certainly Mark kind of planted the seed for me. Charlie nurtured that. Charlie and Noah nurtured that based on really what they learned along the way. And if you haven't seen their documentary, I'd strongly recommend. It's a pitch for Westward Wheels, but certainly it's worth taking a look at it and really working towards the future. And I think advocacy is going to be a big attribute for that. It's something that we're going to have to do. And I think the pandemic has taught us a lot. And I think the best practices that we take out of the pandemic to build in our daily lives is going to be an asset to what we've learned over the past 12 to 15 months.
Craig, so we're really fortunate in Long Beach to have people like you, Kasdan up on 4th Street, Blair, Cohen up in Bixby Knolls. As business leaders, you guys have really been leaders and champions in making the city walkable, bikeable, livable, slow streets. Why in the world have you done that? Why do you think there were so?
I can't speak for everyone else, but certainly as we develop the downtown, we know, especially the downtown, when there's vertical living happening on every block, there's a critical mass and a density that we're dealing with, and not all neighborhoods could say that and see that. But at the same time, downtown, you have limited land, and certainly high price land that you have to be able to utilize at its optimal usage. And with that comes transportation. With that comes parking if you need that, or the infrastructure that is required to provide alternative transportation. It's that last mile concept. And so the bicycle lanes, the pedestrian friendly right of way, the transportation linkages that we have, whether it's waterway or on roads, those are integral parts of community development that certainly leads to economic development at the same time.
Yeah,
they're very much interrelated. So that's why it's important for us. And I think I'm sure Blair and Kasdan and others would maybe say similar things relative to their own districts, but for downtown, it's very, very important.
Yeah, it's interesting. Belmont Shore, near where I live, this is Bike Week in Belmont Shore. So our business leaders really have adopted and taken the leadership role, which is so, to me, really encouraging in where we're headed. So back to the Bixby Bridge, that's going to open up probably in a year and a half now. So we're trying to get people to access it. That's one of the things that's so cool. Again, Craig and I thank so much for Mark and all he did for our community. And we're really looking for other people to step up and help it. I think from this conversation, hopefully you've realized we kind of started off saying, what does the city do? And it changed to what does the community do, right? How does the community take ownership? of what they want their community to be. There's a company in headquartered in Long Beach called Swift, which if you ride a bike a lot and you love to race, you know, Zwift is one of the hottest companies from a game perspective, where you actually get on a bike, on a trainer, and you race with other people, things like that. And why did they come to Long Beach? I mean, why would this global company headquarter here? And it's part because of people like Craig and the culture that we've established, because their people want to live here. I mean, their employees say, hey, you know, I want a place where I can walk, where I can bike. I want to be by the coast. I want great quality air. And Long Beach is working on being all of those things. Molina Healthcare, again, downtown, been a real champion early on. They employed Tony as their ambassador, their health ambassador for their employees, getting back and forth between they were one of the real champions early on of our bike share program. So it's not just about putting in bike infrastructure. It's not just about what the city does. It truly is about our community. So let me open again our panel here. What kind of comments do you guys have to kind of bring things to a close here?
I think I'll chime in real quick, and it's, you know, one thing I just realized that I wanted to share with everyone here, Pedal Movement, we have a staff of about 25 full-time equivalent employees in Long Beach. Half of them live in Long Beach and, you know, LA County. And as the bike share program's expanding and as our advocacy and outreaches are expanding, we really need some talented staff to continue to come on our team. So we are actively hiring. If you go to pedal-movement/jobs, you can apply. We have an event coordinator position. We have, you know, some customer service sales. We have, you know, even bike share rebalancing. So if you want to get involved and get paid, here's your opportunity to do it. You know, Pedal Movement, we're trying to prove that a private business can do social good and take care of their staff and, you know, be competitive and offer health insurance and 401ks. And I think that's why our business has been pretty successful, is because we truly empower from the ground up rather than the top down. And I think that's something that we can, you know, duplicate in Long Beach across the board with that concept of like getting the community, you know, from the ground up, not necessarily channeling things from top down.
And just to remind people, Johnny is the CEO of Pedal. So he has some credibility in what he's saying here. So, one other thing, John, you guys for a long time were sponsoring Moonlight Madness. We still doing Moonlight Madness?
So Moonlight Mash, yeah, it's fun. It's one of you know, my biggest passion projects, and that came about in 2015 with Charlie Hockett over here and Eric Garcia, and it was really a community movement just to get people on bikes and to, you know, highlight the waterfront and cruise around in one big community. And kid you not, we started with like 10, 15 people on the first ride, upwards of, you know, 300 plus folks. You know, we've seen kids from 8, and we've seen, you know, elderly people to 80. So the 80 concept, you know, we're doing that during Moonlight Mash. And you know, we're offering free bike rentals as well. We partnered with Long Beach Bike Share to, you know, give some of these free bikes and promo codes. So it's like, you literally have no excuse to not join this.
So when and where, Johnny?
So with COVID happening, we kind of stopped things right now. But I will say that the group still kind of goes with or without the official movement is, and this is really what we wanted. We wanted this ride to continue to happen, whether, you know, Charlie and I or Eric and I were involved. But right now, due to the current, you know, CDC standards and the California state, I think we'll probably aim for somewhere in July.
So full moon, the night of the full moon, right?
Every full moon, except for, you know, 2020, that doesn't count. Who anyone counting 2020?
You leave from where?
We leave from the Go Active Hub in downtown Long Beach, First and Pine. And again, we'll, you know, check out the Moonlight Mash page. I've had to kind of step away a bit because we have a lot of other tasks at hand that needs some attention on developing. But the culture is still very much alive and very present.
Very cool. Others, we got about 4 minutes left here. So final comments.
I just want to say you can sign up for our newsletter. We often have not just information, but a lot of calls to action, not just from us, but a lot of different people throughout the county doing active transportation work and trying to get stuff done. So I'll just go ahead and put the link in the chat. You can go there and just sign up, and it comes out every 2 weeks, and you'll just get it in your inbox. So,
yeah. So la-bike.org, right? So that's a little bit different of a URL, but la-bike.org it's a great place to go for resources. Anybody else? Things to wrap up with here, Chris?
Yeah, just super excited about the growing interest in biking, and want to continue to support that any way that we can. Yeah, I guess if I'm gonna plug something, I'll just plug my YouTube channel. If you guys want to check it out, we talk about, bike stuff, bike culture, different things like that. And
so what is that YouTube channel? Stick that in the
Propel. Just look for Propel on.
Just spell that for me.
PROPEL. And and overall, I'm just gotta say that I'm just really grateful for the Long Beach community for accepting a New Yorker like me. So.
Chris also has active military background, spent some time in the Middle East, and came back and said, how do we do good for the world? And, cook up the mantle of e-bikes. So,
Trying.
Ricardo? Craig?
I was just going to thank the panelists and thank you, Alan, for moderating today's webinar. I really appreciate the insights that each of the panelists presented today, and certainly the insight that they see as a future amenity to our communities, regardless of where you're living. And I think this is really important. Chris, thanks very much for investing in downtown Long Beach. Charlie and Johnny, thanks for all you do and what you've started in Long Beach and now taken to other cities. Brenda, it was nice to meet you, and thanks very much for what you do for the county. Ricardo, keep up the great work and continue to believe and stay strong there. Alan, thanks very much for your friendship and your leadership. I certainly appreciate everything everyone's doing, and just let us know what we could do to help. Again, we just encourage our community members to get involved, to advocate for what you feel as though that is best for your own neighborhood and your community, and raise the awareness.
Correct.
Last, I'd like to thank the Long Beach Post for helping co-produce this. Without their help, this is not going to happen as wide-ranging as it did, and I certainly appreciate their support as well. So thanks, everyone. Stay tuned to next month's downtown discussions and our subject of the month in June. I think we're going to look at Pride and what Pride means to Long Beach, and look forward to the panel discussion then as well. Y'all take care of yourself and appreciate your support. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Craig.
Bye, you guys.
Later.